A very, very warm welcome to everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm incredibly grateful that you could all be here with us. A very, very big thank you to our amazing panelists, Joe, Linzi, and Sharon. Thank you for joining us today. We're really looking forward to this. It's been a highly anticipated session, I know, with our membership and based on the response that we've had to this. So thank you very much. Particularly topical, obviously, because when we actually started planning this event at the beginning of the year, no one could have foreseen that what was ahead of us in terms of the COVID-19 crisis, but also the impact that that would have on the economic landscape and on business owners. So I think we are, everything that we talk about today is going to be really relevant to what we're facing in terms of both our kind of personal experience, but also business. I'd also like to say a really big thank you to Collyer Bristow, who are our legal partners. We've been curating a series of events with them, and I'm incredibly grateful to them. They're a law firm which really champion and support ambitious entrepreneurs, businesses, and individuals, and they've provided a great amount of support to us as the women's chapter as we've grown, and we absolutely love their approach. And I think it's quite rare to find a law firm that has an entrepreneurial mindset in the way that they do. So thank you very much, Sharon and your team. Just before we kind of kick off with the actual discussions, and I'm going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and give a little context around their journeys. A few house rules. We are recording this session, and I will be distributing an edited version of it to all of you in a follow-up email afterwards. So if for some other reason you have to leave a little bit early, don't worry. Also, from a chat perspective, if you've got questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat box. I will be keeping an eye on that. If relevant, I'll ask a question during the discussion, but otherwise we will have some time at the end for questions and answers. And the other kind of most important thing is please do keep yourselves on mute. It just minimizes background noise and will allow everybody to hear our speakers most effectively. So obviously speakers, make sure you're unmuted, but if everybody else can keep themselves on mute, that'd be really helpful. And without further ado, I would like to say a very warm welcome again to Joe Tutchener-Sharp, who is the founder of Scamp and Dude, which is a superpower infused brand for both adults and children. Linzi Boyd, who is a dear friend and somebody I've been to many of your courses, Linzi. Linzi is the founder of the Bob Group. She's a serial entrepreneur and a renowned author. I highly recommend her courses, and I'm so looking forward to the insights she has to share with us today. And Sharon, who is a partner at Collyer Bristow and specializes in all things commercial and company law. As I've said before, we absolutely love your approach, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your insights today because I'm sure they're going to be very practical and implementable. So I would like to just kick off first with giving each of you an opportunity, just a couple of minutes, and Linzi, perhaps we can start with you, just to give us, everyone in the room here, some context as to how you got to where you are today. So Linzi, will you shoot first?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you very much, Michelle, for inviting me on your webinar today. You are a dear friend, and we've worked a lot together over the last few years. And I started out in business when I was 15 years of age. I left school at an incredibly young age, and at the age of 18 I started in my first business, which was in retail, and I brought diesel and replay into the north of England. If I fast forward to the age of 24, I set my second business up when my friends were in university, and I had a shoe business that I was manufacturing shoes in Korea, standing in the factories of Korea for about 4 years as a young woman with a lot of men inside the factory. And I set up 7 distribution channels around the world, and I managed to sell the business to Caterpillar when I was 24 years of age. And I then transferred my knowledge over 18 years, and I built, renovated and refreshed some of the most famous brands on the high street, working with a lot of big retail fashion brands. And over the 18-year period, I was very well known for turning these brands into famous brands. 8 years ago, I transferred out of the consumer world. And in that consumer world, I got very well known for spotting gaps and spotting consumer trends and literally moving businesses into future gaps before the competition. And so 8 years ago, I decided to move out of the consumer world and move into the enterprise world. And I met my business partner, Darren Sherlaw, who came from the fund management world, and we joined our knowledge together and started a business called Bob. Bob is the first entrepreneur school that is an on and offline platform that teaches businesses how to build a business around a purpose to be able to go and impact change in the world, which is how I met my lovely friend Michelle. And so on this next hour, I believe that Michelle has invited me to come on to be able to discuss with you what are the trends that are going on in society, what are the trends that are going on in business, and literally how could you move your business, if you are indeed in business, into a future gap to be able to move yourself through the pandemic and actually move yourself into a 21st century modern day business.
Thank you very much, Linzi. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. Jo, can I hand over to you?
Yes. So I started my career in public relations. I worked on various fashion and beauty brands and ended up as head of press for Estee Lauder and Tom Ford Beauty. And then I set up my own PR company, which I ran for about 8 years. And then I decided to sell my shares in the company. I started a family. I wanted to do something different. I decided I'd spent years kind of building other people's brands. And when you work in a PR company, when you're a founder of a PR company, as Linzi will know, you don't just do PR. You become someone who works on new product development, on brand building, telling them direction they need to go on, building stories. It's so much more. And you watch what you're putting into it, turn these brands around, and you're like, I want a brand. I want to do this. I want to create something. And originally I'd started working with a really big skincare blogger to start a skincare line. And I've been really excited about that as I was selling the shares in my PR company. And then out of the blue, it's if you have never sold your shares in a company before, you wouldn't know, but it can be incredibly stressful for lots and lots of reasons. But it was such a stressful period that I actually ended up with having a brain hemorrhage. And I discovered that I had a lump on my brain. And this is the moment that kind of changed my life forever. Because at the time, my children were only 1 and 3. And the thought of leaving them without a mum was just absolutely horrendous, as you can imagine. And I discovered I had to have brain surgery. And in the weeks running up to the surgery, I took a look at my life, and I kept going back to the Golden Gates and kind of assessing my life and thinking, have I done enough? Have I done enough? Have I done everything I wanted to do? And I couldn't stop thinking that I hadn't done enough good. And I didn't even realize until that moment that was important to me. I'd run a PR company. I'd had a great life. I'd always been a good friend and a good daughter, and I'd never done anything wrong to anyone, a good, honest person. But for some reason, I just knew that I really wanted to have given back and helped more and made a difference to people's lives, which I hadn't. And I was really worried that I didn't have any time left to do that. So I made myself a pact that if I made it through my surgery, that my next career would be something to do with giving back and helping people and doing more good. So that was the very, very start of the thought behind Scamp and Dude. And when I came out of surgery, and I did make it through, thank goodness, I had this side of my head was shaved. I was cut from here to here with 20 staples. It was very visual. So I didn't want my children to see me. So I had 10 days where we couldn't see each other. And the longest I'd been apart was 3 days before that, 2 days. So it was a really long time. And I spent a lot of that time thinking about what I wish had been available to help them and what I wished I could have given them before I went in. And I wished I could have given them a superhero to watch over them. And I came up with the idea of a cuddly toy superhero that would watch over them that they could snuggle onto. And I thought, imagine if you had a pocket on the back and you could put your photo in it. So you could say, Mummy's still here, and they could snuggle onto you. And they'd also have this superhero that they really believe is going to protect them, looking over them. So that in hospital was this little idea I had. And then as I came out of hospital, I couldn't stop thinking about it, thinking, I want to make them, because I was just worried so much about all the other children that were away from their parents and the poor parents stuck in hospital worrying about their children. So I thought, I'm going to make them. And I didn't even at that point think it would be a business. I just thought, I'll make them and I'll just donate them to families who are going through the same thing, or any children who have to be apart from their loved ones. So I started working on looking for a manufacturer, because I'd never done that before. And then I thought, actually, there's more to this. Children have separation anxiety when they go to school, when they go to nursery. It's not just when they go to hospital. What about a clothing line? And I came up with the slogan, a superhero has my back. And I thought, I'll put that in the back of t-shirts, put it back on sweatshirts, and they can tot off to nursery and think, a superhero is watching over me. I'm okay, I've got this. And that's how it actually started to begin. So January, I had the brain surgery. I registered the name Scamp and Dude in the March, and we launched the brand into Liberty in the November. And I look back on that now, and I look at that timescale and go, how on earth did that happen? And that's not me showing off. That's just me going, what on earth? How did that actually happen in that time? And I think I was so grateful to have a second chance at life, that I was so grateful to be alive. I had this this fire in my belly and this new purpose of, I can help people with this. I can help children who have to be apart from their loved ones. I'm going to do it. And I just turned into a little crazy person that was like, I'm going to do this. This is happening, and didn't stop until it was there. And so that's how I got where I am.
Brilliant. That's amazing. And I'm seeing the messages in the chat here. Everyone's going, amazing story. And it truly is. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. I mean, I wonder, was your husband worried about you? Because obviously you had major surgery and then you came out and launched a business.
Yeah, and my parents were as well, and everyone. But I had terrible migraines, and it would make me stop. So my body would make me stop. So it'd give me a migraine, and I'd have to lie down and be like, come on, go. But it was. I think it was very good for me, for my mind as well as physically, to have something. Having been in that position where I thought I might not make it through this surgery, and I wouldn't have achieved what I'd wanted to do, and I wouldn't have actually helped many people. To be given that second chance, I was like a rocket then, just going, I'm going to do this. I'm going to help.
Wow. Thank you so much. Can I hand over to you, Sharon, to share some insights into your journey and how you've landed up in the role that you are?
That's just such an amazing, inspirational story. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to follow that with a slightly boring professional advisor piece. But as Michelle kindly introduced me, I'm a partner at Collyer Bristow and part of our team of solicitors that focus on entrepreneurs and their businesses. So my particular specialism is company law, the relationship between the shareholders, funding, financing, investment, maybe making some strategic acquisitions, the contracts that you need to do your business, with, in the end, a view to an exit, whether that is a sale or whether that is passing it on to the next generation. How did I get here? Well, I spent the first few years of my career at one of the very big City of London law firms, one of those firms that's referred to as the Magic Circle. And just from the name, you can probably gather there's a lot of testosterone around. I moved on from there to PwC, which is one of the big four. Yep, more testosterone. And I came through to partnership there quite soon after I'd had my son and gone back to work on a flexible working pattern, which just goes to prove that it can be done, that things have changed and things really are continuing to change for the better. And then I've come to Collyer Bristow because I'm just so excited about what they are doing with entrepreneurs, with owner managers. Because it might sound a bit corny, but I actually like doing law and getting to the end of the day and feeling that I've helped somebody achieve their goals, that I've helped a fabulous business move on to the next step and kept the investor and their investment safe, protected them against risk, and created and achieved something brilliant for fabulous people. You're on mute.
Yes, I did it. I was.
That is going to be the slogan of this entire lockdown experience.
Yeah,
you're on mute.
You're on mute. Or as we were talking about all the interruptions of children and dogs and all sorts of things. So as I mentioned earlier, obviously we're very much in uncharted territory here from an economic perspective. I mean, I think obviously some of the original shock is sort of worn off, but no one really knows what's coming next. And there's obviously talk of us now preparing for a second spike in November. And so I think it's, definitely changed the economics landscape, but also has resulted in us needing to shift the way that we perceive the future of our businesses. And what we, hopefully going to come out of today with is some practical advice and insights around how best we can weather that storm. Obviously from a COVID-19 perspective, but also just general, future-proofing your business, because things are moving really, really quickly. So I wondered if we could just kind of kick off the discussion around that, with each of you giving either or sharing a challenge that you've faced over this time, or maybe it's an opportunity that's come out of the experience, because I think there are many, many opportunities that have arisen, or we've been forced to view different aspects of our business. And I hear this a lot from the women's chapter members of say, yes, originally they thought, oh my word, what are we going to do? But actually, it forced everybody to kind of go back into their businesses and look for opportunities and exploit those. And out of that have come some really interesting revenue streams. So if you could just share either a challenge or an opportunity that you've experienced over the last few months in terms of your business journey. Can we start with you, Jo?
Yeah, I think challenge-wise has been, we have a little bricks and mortar shop in Highgate, so that's probably been the biggest challenge for us, because we had to close the shop, but we obviously still had to keep paying the rent, and that's difficult obviously because you've got nothing coming in, and we weren't eligible for any of the grants because it's such a tiny little shop that we fall under the Camden small business rate. So you don't get any business rates, you get business rate relief. And the £10,000 that was being offered to businesses was only if you pay business rates. So we kind of fell between the gap of that. So that was just paying out the money every month for rent, just literally throwing it in the bin because nothing was coming in. So that has been a bit of a challenge, but it's kind of a little bit insignificant, because then the website, I was so nervous that the fulfillment company was going to have to close. So I was watching what was happening in Spain and Italy and going, okay, their fulfillment companies are still open, like maybe we'll be okay, but putting together like worst case scenario forecasts that if that closes, what am I going to do? Because I'll have nothing coming in, and I've got staff to pay and they've got families, and you're putting together your worst case scenario. But our warehouse never closed, and our sales have been absolutely skyrocketed, because I think for two reasons. One, everyone's working from home and needs comfortable, stylish loungewear. So that's our main thing that we make. So that was one reason. And another reason is I think people want to shop with brands who are doing good and helping other people and are ethical and sustainable, and they're thinking more about who they're shopping with, which again for us has been really beneficial. So we've actually ended up being way better than we thought it would from a sales point of view. So I think we just went total glass half empty going, this could be terrible, and that's actually been very good for us from a sales point of view. So I have to just get over the shop thing and go, just get over it.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, and that's really positive, isn't it? Because I think there are a lot of businesses that have been pleasantly surprised by what's come out of this. And it is just about looking up to see the opportunities and enjoy the positives rather than focusing just on the doom and gloom. I mean, obviously I know that running a business at this time brings loads of staff challenges and leadership challenges and all of that with it. It's there are lots of storms to weather on a daily basis. Sharon, from the perspective of your clients, perhaps you can give us some sort of insights to some of the challenges that they've been facing, or some positives that have come out of the businesses you work with.
I've been hugely impressed by the agility with which our businesses and our clients are responding to a hugely changed circumstance. Nobody could have imagined this a few short months ago, and yet it seems to have been going on forever. And the ability that they've had to say, just as Joe was describing, this is where we find ourselves. We can't do anything about the circumstances. All we can change is our reaction to it. And everybody has been reacting and stepping up and responding incredibly bravely and remarkably well. I think from our own perspective, what we do as a business is such a team effort. That's probably been the most challenging thing, is to keep in touch as a team and make sure that all of the team members are getting the right experience, the right support, being kept busy but not too busy when you can't see them every day. So we've had to be very disciplined about checking in regularly, having those touch points, which in a way has given a benefit of having to think more carefully about who we're working with, what their job workload is looking like. It's easy to be lazy and work with the person that's sitting right next to you when you're in the office, whereas at the moment, everybody is equally sitting next to me. So I'm choosing more sensibly what I do.
But also from a professional services perspective, I mean, you know, if you would have thought that law firms and accounting firms would have been able to have all of their teams working remotely, no one really would have considered that before. Whereas now we've seen a massive shift in the way that teams work together, and the agility and, you know, kind of work-life balance, etc. So it's going to result in a very different way of working going forward. I think for businesses that traditionally always felt that they needed to be in physical spaces with their employees.
I think you're right, but there's a high level of awareness of the circumstances of other people. I know that I'm very lucky to have a garden. We live a bit outside London, and I might complain about the commute, but it's meant that I've been able to weather this perhaps more easily than some other people. Although I suspect, I'm going to stereotype here a little bit, all of us will have had to balance the work, life, childcare, family responsibilities, other things with everything else that we have to fit in. And my takeaway from it, I think, is that I've had to be very disciplined with time blocking, as I've done now. So my son knows that I'm on a call. And I'm hoping that unless he falls downstairs or if we hear any crashing in the background, I'll have to attend to it. But otherwise, he knows that this is mum's work time. And he's got a chance to see me as a professional person rather than just mum. But equally, when he needs some of my time, I've had to block that time out and do that. And I've gone away from the idea of multitasking to the idea of time blocking and doing everything in sequence. Because if you're trying to do both things, mum and work, you're not doing either one properly. We hear a lot about multitasking, and I prefer sequential tasking.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Linzi, you obviously run your own business, but you work with a multitude of businesses as well. So it would be lovely to hear your insights around challenges and opportunities.
Oh, look, when I heard Jo tell her story, wow, how inspiring your story is, I have to say. When I heard you say a story about moving out of the world of building other people's businesses and then building your own business, it hugely resonated with me. I sat with my business partner 8 years ago and I said to him, I actually can't do this anymore. I cannot build businesses just around commercial gain anymore. I was so fed up with the market and spending 19 years of building these huge brands with not, for me, much personal return in regard of how that was nourishing my purpose. And so I sat with him and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, Darren, I want to shift the world into a new era through the eyes of brands. My belief is that institutions alone won't make the change. It has to come from the people, from the businesses, from the brands. And these people will be our 3% leaders, and they'll go and lead us into a new era. And what if we could build brands to shift industries to make a positive change in the world? And he was like, okay then. And so bless him, 8 years on, he helped me to build a business, and we built a technology platform that is the first purpose-led platform that connects businesses all around the world to trade, and it's called Bob Earth. Now, before the pandemic, I had a business that was offline, and it was running business schools all around the world, as you know, and you've been into the one in the UK, but we were running them in Australia and Canada and Singapore and so forth. And then the pandemic hit. And because we've had about 3,500 businesses go through the school, scale ups and established, and a few, early stage growth and startup and so forth, the weekend that we knew we were going to go into lockdown, I rang my business partners and I said, okay, there's two things that are going to happen here. One is we're going to need to pivot like mad to get our business online and support the business community. And the second thing is we're going to need to also pivot their businesses to be able to help them through the pandemic. And so we did two things, and it was, and I talked about this. We did two things. One is we got a webinar series live. Like, we went in lockdown on the Sunday or Monday, and we were live on the Thursday. And we went out to all the business community and we went, look, this is not going to be perfect, but we are here because we built a business to be able to build brands to shift industries and help them to grow and scale. And if we don't come out straight away on a front foot and enable these businesses, a lot of them are going to go out of business. And so we got a couple of hundred of the businesses online on the Thursday. And I have to say, like you just said, Sharon, it was hugely inspiring. The fact that we had one business in Australia that had gone from 43 million in revenue to zero overnight. We had another one in Scotland that was drowning. We had another one in Australia, my beautiful Sav, the tomato man, who his business was going out. It was emotional. And on top of that, we were pivoting our own business to try and move it online and be able to launch this technology platform that I'd been working on for 4 years, to be able to have a platform where everybody could come together and, one, have a community, and secondly, have all the learning curriculum online so that we could enable the businesses to learn and grow together. So over a 10-week period, the challenge was, I don't think I've ever worked as hard in my life. And that includes my shoe business, which I have to say was the most challenging period of my entire life, because I was 21 and 20, can you imagine 21 years of age with 7 distribution channels, not knowing how on earth you're even building a business in the first place. So that was hugely challenging and stressful. And I have to say, I put this period in that bucket, because the challenge was bringing our business online, and we had to bring all our team together every single morning and change roles, turn the business, get people in different spaces to be able to get this technology platform live and get all the curriculums live. And the second more challenging thing was actually supporting the business community. How were we able to do this over the period of time and keep businesses in business? And so with the webinars, that was our first, okay, if we can put on a webinar once a week, every week, we can just hold their hands. And I have never had so many emails coming in for support. So we were working behind the scenes. And then the second one was, because we looked at the market need of the client, we were able to build 3 programs. One was an L&D program that enabled to take these businesses through the journey, and that enabled them to come. We had a sign up of 147 businesses in 6 days, because they were so desperate to be able to come and understand how to build a business, or how to remodel their business, or how to move their business into a space. And we looked at it and we went, okay, we keep the price low, we go volume, we're able to go across the market rather than go high end in a high price, and support the business community. the opportunity, the biggest thing that's come out of it is the community. I am so grateful for the people, not only for the team that work with me and with my business partners that are so purpose-driven, that got together, that worked kind of day and night, that everybody put everything in to kind of do this. But what I'm also grateful about is I've never seen, we had 1,200 people come into a Facebook group in about 5 weeks, and the business community that came together overnight. And not only we supported them, but they supported each other, is probably one of the most inspiring things that I've gone through in my whole career. And now we're kind of moving businesses on and they're in a space, and to be able to sit and look back over the last 16 weeks and sit here and go, oh my gosh, quite sure how we've done it. And also, wow, these businesses, they've been on, some of them have been on Channel 7, some of them have been on, you know, big television programs in the UK, all talking about, you know, what they've been doing with their businesses and so forth. It's hugely, hugely inspiring. So,
I mean, I would definitely, touching on the community piece, totally agree, because we've been running these events also on a weekly basis, and the consistent theme that comes out of what business owners are sharing, the women's chapter members sharing about their businesses, and those that have been able to successfully pivot, has been directly correlated to the strength of their community and the support. But also being willing to go to their supply chain, their customers, their clients, their followers, and saying, what do you need? How can we help you? And being kind of I guess vulnerable enough to be able to do that, because a lot of the time as business owners, we give our clients and our customers what we think they need, as opposed to actually asking them what they need. So I think there's been a huge amount of humility that's come out of this process, hasn't there? Sort of kind of actually really connecting with people.
The interesting thing that's come out of it, and what we taught right from the get-go, was lead with the human response and forget about your products and your benefits for now. Stop selling and start connecting. And so one of the things when all the businesses were going, oh my gosh, my business, it's out of business, what am I going to do? We drove the same method and system through the businesses, and they all went out and led with the people brands, the personal response, and actually not the business brand and the products and benefits. And because of that, they stopped selling and started engaging. And because of that, they were able to listen to the market need. What is it that they really want? What is it that the market's looking for? And respond in a purpose-driven way, and then start to connect with, you know, what it is they're selling and the products and the benefits around that, but not leading with that. And that was a big change point for a lot of businesses that were going through the early stage of the pandemic.
Brilliant. So if we kind of thinking about how-to type approach and future-proofing our businesses, Jo, I would like to hand over to you on this piece, because I think as a business owner, I think one of the things that we often neglect is protecting our intellectual property and our trademarks and things. And I think a lot of small businesses fall into this trap because they don't think they're big enough, or that there's a need for that. And it's almost kind of one of those chicken and egg things, that once you find yourself in that situation, you wish you'd done something. And I know you've had some very interesting experiences around your intellectual property and infringements thereof. Would you be so kind as to share some of those experiences with us? Because they're very much David and Goliath, for the lack of a female equivalent.
Well, the first one happened very quickly. I can't remember exactly how long we'd been going, but I think it was even less than a year that we'd actually been going. And I had customers on Instagram sending me pictures of this top in a supermarket that had used our slogan, so a superhero has my back, and it was on the back of a top, exactly how we'd put it, with lightning bolts. And
it was the same font as well, wasn't it? Or pretty much.
There was a lot of similarities. Yeah. And it's one of those things when you've done everything you can as a small business, and you've registered, like I registered all my trademarks before I even launched. So I had trademarked a superhero has my back, Scamp and Dude, and also Superhero Sleep Buddies, which are my the lovely superhero comforters. And I'd registered all of those things, and I'd done everything I could do. And also, when you've only been going for not even a year, you don't think you're that visible yet. You know, you're building your community. At that point, we were only available in Liberty and on our own website. I don't think we'd gone into Selfridges or anywhere else at that point. So I didn't really feel like we were that visible, but I'd had a lot of press when we launched. There'd been a lot of press coverage because my history was in PR. I had a great network in magazines and newspapers, and social media was really, our Instagram was really taking off and people were getting involved. So there'd been a lot of news, and I guess people were talking about us. And apparently, so what I found out since, that a lot of supermarkets or big stores look out for small brands who are making waves, or who are in the papers are writing about, and they instead of actually having a designer, they just have buyers who buy items of clothing that are doing really well and that seem to be hot of the moment, and they just send them to factories and suppliers and go, do something like that, just make a few changes and it'll be fine. And that's what happens so much in the industry, which I just think so embarrassing. It's like there's no integrity whatsoever. You're like, you've got a designer, let them design, don't just copy what someone else is doing. So anyway, when I saw this, I was really upset at first, because you just think, can't believe someone's done this, especially when everything I'm doing, like the Superhero Sleep Buddies, we've donated one for every one sold since we've launched. So we've donated over 1,500 of them, and we donate a scarf to a woman with cancer or the mother of a child with cancer for every one sold. We've donated over 1,250 of them. We've donated over 1,000 sweatshirts. We've raised almost £100,000 with our swag bag. I'm trying to help as many people as I can, and then you get this supermarket come and take one of the heart of your brand and just rip it off and put it on the back of a top, and you're like, that's not okay. It's really not okay. And they weren't doing any charitable thing with it. They were using the goodwill that people have associated with what I'm doing to sell something really cheap that's probably made in a horrible, unethical factory. I'm guessing at that, but and it was just very hurtful and very upsetting. So I got straight onto the lawyers and said, I want to fight them. I can't let them do this. They can't do it. And it took a long time, because at first they thought, oh, she's a tiny brand, she hasn't got any money. She'll go away, because apparently what a lot of these big brands do, their lawyers just keep making you write another letter, because you have to pay per letter. Let's keep making them write another letter until their business cannot afford to pay this anymore. But I was like, I'm going to keep writing another letter, and I'm going to keep writing another letter. And in the end, I thought, I am going to bankrupt my business with this. So I need a little bit of help from my community. And Instagram has been so important to my business since I've launched. And I never call my community followers. I hate the word followers, because it feels like they're just following you around. And that's not what my community is. We've got, I can't remember, at last look, I think it was 149,000 of members of my community on Instagram. And they all feel like friends who have got my back, who are in this together. And when this happened, I reached out to some influencer friends and some kind of celebrity friends and press friends and said, would you post this image, which was the image of the back of the sweatshirt saying, a superhero has my back. Would you post this at 8 o'clock tonight? And would you say this, basically? They were standing up to this supermarket, supporting small brands, and it's not okay. And everyone posted it. And then and it said, please share. And then everyone else started sharing. And then it was unbelievable. I could not believe what I was seeing. And I was just literally scrolling through Instagram. And it was when Instagram actually got me to come and talk on a panel about it, because they said it was when Instagram turned pink, because it was this back of this pink t-shirt. And it was just scrolling through of people going, this is not right. It is supporting the underdog and going, this isn't right. And it was going quite crazy, and all the influencers were boycotting this brand, saying we're not going to do the ad that we were meant to do. And on the Monday, my lawyer got a call straight away from their lawyer going, okay, tell her to stop. and then it was all sorted out. But I had to put that pressure on to actually make that stop. And then the next one was another high street brand. I'd had a tip off about this one. So a designer contacted me and said, I'm a freelance designer. I've just been into this store, this design department, and your clothes and your images are all over their design department. So just watch out for their autumn winter collection because it's going to be heavily inspired. And I was like, oh, great. And then you're waiting, you're like, oh God. And the catalogue came and I was looking through going, is there anything? Is this? And I couldn't really see anything. I thought, okay, it's okay. And then some customers started sending me this image of this top. And it was basically a replica of what was our best-selling sweatshirt. And it even had the superpower button. So all of our products have a neon bolt. And this is a superpower button that you press. It started off for kids, because we started off as a kids brand, to make kids be able to press it to give themselves superpowers when they really need it. And it could be a confidence or strength or anything they might need. There's a video on my Instagram of this little boy called Freddie who has cerebral palsy, and his mum tagged me in this video of him, and he was going on an unaided walk. So he put his frame down and he was going to go off and do his walk. And first he pressed his superpower button to give him those powers, and off he went on this walk. I was absolutely floods of tears, just thinking it's actually working. What I'm doing is helping. And yeah, this brand had just put a superpower button on a top that was leopard and had the same effect, the colour and the same effect that I got. And it was obviously, I had so many customers going, oh, I thought you'd done a collaboration with them. I saw it in the shop. I just thought you'd done a collaboration. So again, I had to go, I can't just let this happen. I've got to stand up. And the more people that stand up when this happens, the less it will happen. And I think that's what's important, is that we all have to stand up. Like the BBC came and filmed at my house with various other small brands who this had happened to. And when I was talking to them all, none of them had gone to a lawyer, none of them had fought it. And it was awful what was happening to them. But they'd all said, we were scared to talk to a lawyer. And we were scared, we didn't know, we thought it cost loads of money. And you're like, everyone's got to just have that confidence to say, we've got to stop and not let it happen. Otherwise, they will just keep doing it and using all the small brands' ideas, and it's just not right.
So Sharon, it might be worth asking you to chip in here from a kind of a legal perspective. I mean, what's the process that that the business owner should follow? Is it to follow Joe's lead and do it right from the very beginning, regardless of what you expect the growth of your business to be like, and make sure that you're covered?
You absolutely did the right things to begin with. So you knew that it was your brand, your idea, you'd properly protected it. So when anybody starts looking as though they're going to try and rip off your brand, you've got legal rights to take to them and to their lawyers to say, you can't do this because, and you've got that whole fact pattern there. And I hope over the course of this and the other events that we're doing, we'll prove that lawyers aren't quite so scary, and that you can come and talk to us, and that we can be helpful.
Yeah.
I've got one of my colleagues I can see is on this call from our intellectual property department, but actually I know we've got a lot to get through today, and we are aiming to do a masterclass on the basic legal protections for your business later on this year. So perhaps we'll park that and come back to it then, Michelle, if that would work for you.
Yeah, because I think there has actually been a question here, and I think this is a really valid one as well, about, so does a trademark not work? I mean, Joe, in your case, you've done everything correctly, and yet you've, and fortunately, you had a community that could help you, but there are lots of brands that aren't in that situation. So what happens? Do they just get eaten by the lion? Or how do you make sure that what you put in place is actually enforceable?
Well, I think if I hadn't got the trademark, I wouldn't have had a leg to stand on to fight them. And I think that's the important thing, is you must get them. But yeah, that doesn't mean no one will ever rip you off. They definitely will. Well, not definitely, but they might. But at least you can then defend yourself, and if you've got the protection in place. If you haven't got the trademark, they'll go, you haven't got the trademark, we can do what we like, and they can use it. So it's really important to get it, but you've also got to keep your eye on what's going on. Like, we've had so many other cases as well, which I've not really gone into, but I've got someone now who actually, that's their job, is to check for sites where they're selling our things and using our little characters are on the kids' clothes, have been lifted and put on, my slogans on the back of t-shirts here, there and everywhere, and I haven't got the time to be finding them. So you've just got to look out, keep an eye on what's going on and protect yourself, but get all those legal things in place first, so that if it does happen, you can fight and say, no, this isn't okay.
Thank you. That's great. Linzi, I'm going to pass over to you now, because you are famous for predicting and seeing trends and how kind of the face of business has changed. What are the fundamentals that business owners should be bearing in mind and taking action around in terms of future-proofing their businesses? Kind of some
interestingly, listening to Jo and actually reflecting one of the trends and I'm reflecting on my own shoe business, because I had a shoe business from 21 to 24, and we had to patent everything and trademark everything. It was a pretty famous shoe brand, and we had a lot of people at the time rip it off, and we used to take a lot of people to court and win. And this was a very young age of my career, and it always fascinated me why was I having to do this in the first place. And a bit like Jo, even though I trademarked and patented and so forth, I was still in a space of the small person taking these very, very big shoe brands to court. And when I reflect on that, there's a trend that Jo's just come that we talk about, which is called silo to integrated. And it sits really around the space that it used to be around I'm building my business. This is my purpose. So as an example, some of my clients, I am engineering a better society. I am finding the cure for cancer in dogs. I am finding helping you to find the architecture of your business for health, and so forth. And what we say is there's a trend that's coming that's around integration. And it's no longer an I conversation, it's a we conversation. And Jo's just done this beautifully and highlighted it. So what we've been teaching people is how to campaign together rather than separately, how to go and shift industries together rather than separately. And so when we say to people, and this sits with your future-proofing side and trends side of things, it's moving in a lot of spaces from I to we. And the power of we is much more impactful than the power of I. And so as an example, Jo, if you wanted to take that trend up a layer, again, based on what you've just done with your community, you could actually go into a space of the industry and come out of the brand space and get all the industries together to be able to put that into a regulation around actually the fact that stops larger businesses from actually being able to do this in the first place. If we went into a we conversation and now campaigned that across markets, across industries, which you've already done. So you've gone up, as we would describe it, into the silo, but you've gone into your community and your influencers, which is moving it into an integration space. What if we now went across markets? Because this is happening in multitude of industries. So in the service industry, people are having their IP taken off them because they're doing technology platforms or they have methodologies, and then other people are coming in and actually, taking IP. And what you say to people is you need to publish and trademark to be able to safeguard, but still you need a lot of money to be able to go and fight the big boys. So one of the trends is moving from silo to integrated. If you go in a vertical and you go up into your community, how do you go along the industries and actually shift an industry or shift a trend? And one of the best ways of doing that is then campaigning and being able to go across market rather than just in one vertical. Another thing that we're saying to people, and this has been through the pandemic, and this has been really key to say to people, is that people think that their product is their business, and actually there's an asset that sits inside everybody's business. And sometimes it's not the product that's your asset, it's something different. And there are many businesses, if a business is going out of business, if a business is doing well in business, what you can say to them is, the business that's going out of business, look at the DNA, look at the herbs and spices, look at the asset of the business. What is it that you're great at? And bring it to the top of the business model and remodel the business around that. And so if you've got a fantastic business that's like Joe's, that's in the product space of clothing, could she move it into, could she look at the asset of the business, which is around the campaigning side, which is the cultural side, and how does she move it into other areas? Could she be educating the market? Is there a fund that she could provide to smaller businesses to be able to be doing things in different ways? How do you lift the asset out of the business and bring it to the top? And that way you're future-proofing your business. So it's no longer just about the one product into the one channel. You're actually going across the business and building multiple products and multiple channels with the thing that you're great at that sits at the top, and not the product that sits at the top.
Wow, that's brilliant. Thank you, Linzi. And I know from your workshops that I've been on, it often is the community that is the asset, right? And your ability to bring people together and harness that power of people. So not thinking about selling to, you know, B2B or B2C, but that actually every single person in your, it's a business to people. And you taught me that, and it's amazing how on a daily basis we need to have that.
And that's a key trend when we talk about community. What we're now saying is people are still stuck in a mindset of, am I a B2B business or am I a B2C business? And what we've been teaching people, this was one of our webinars, that the key trend is actually business to people, and the emergence of B2B and B2C, and businesses that were building their business post-digital, that have learned to build a business post-digital, now recognize the power of going across from B2B and B2C and no longer just sitting in one space. And that drives then into a much larger community. If 20th century thinking was around having a community on Facebook as an example, 21st century thinking is, how do I bring my community onto my own platform, and how do now I engage with them? And exactly like Joe said, they're not followers, they're not following you like sheep. They are your tribe, they are your people around you, they are the people, your advocates, the ones that are gonna go on this journey with you and actually build the businesses together and shift industries together rather than doing it separately.
Thank you, Linzi. Thank you. Sharon, I'd love to hand over to you now, because I know that you deal with all aspects of future-proofing your clients' businesses. Are there some kind of key elements that the people in the room here today should be bearing in mind in terms of the next 6 months, the next year, and what they should urgently have in place? You're on mute. There we go.
That's a very big question. What's the best way for me to answer that?
Maybe what are the most common pitfalls?
Whatever you do, and it ties into what Linzi is saying, it's about authenticity. Be you, and understand what makes you you and what makes you different. And it's the same in any industry, I would suggest, and protect that. Really focus on doing that bit, and get a team around you that can help you with the things that you are less good at, that you don't enjoy, that you're less comfortable with.
What about
we talked previously about sort of strong management teams?
Yes,
as well, and that's, if it can be not all about you, and that's probably the biggest hurdle for an entrepreneur. It starts off being, it's your business, it's your idea, it's your baby, but it'll always be incredibly hard if it's just you. So it's trying to separate, if you possibly can, your business from your personal, to manage the risk in that business, to give it its own identity and a track record and a credit history so that it stands alone, it stands for something, and you stand for something in that business.
Well, and that's really, I mean, particularly relevant. And we were speaking about this before the call started. And I think one of the things that's come out of the COVID-19 crisis is that we've all become a lot more aware of our mortality and how quickly things can change. And I know, Joe, you definitely know this because you started a whole business off the back of an awareness around your mortality. But I think it has forced people to think about what happens if I get sick? You know, and to contemplate the legacy of your business in terms of, can it go on without me? So would you say that that's a kind of a key piece of advice that you would offer, is for people to think about what plan you have in place for your business to survive you, from an operational perspective, but also, you know, for the sake of your teams and your management teams, and then further on, as I think you've spoken about before, what that means in terms of buyouts, etc.
Yes, absolutely. What does it mean when the business is not only about you as an individual? What would happen if you weren't able to work for a period? Is there somebody who could look after that? Would it have to be mothballed? What would happen to your business, or what would happen to your business if one of your business partners wasn't able to work for a period? What are your fallback plans? And it's always difficult when you are in the throes of running the business to think about those things in the abstract, but it will in the end generate a fairer result. So you can think about what should happen if one of us is no longer able to be active in the business. Should they have to step back and offer their shares to somebody else? Should they be able to become sort of a sleeping partner, in effect, where they've contributed the cash but aren't able to then be active in contributing the effort? There are basically three things that anybody gets legally when they're doing the business, and that's income, capital, what happens if the business is sold, and power, voting rights, influencing the direction of the business. And all individuals will have different priorities and may want different amounts of those things at different times. So I would suppose the best thing to future-proof your business is to think legally in those buckets and divide that up amongst the owners in the way that best works for them.
And what about, because I know we've only got a few minutes left, but what about thinking, you know, is there a sort of a strategy around separating your personal and business interests? Because I know a lot of business owners that have been caught out in that way, where there isn't kind of, or they don't have a legal perspective on the one and the other. And so when the business tanks, their personal interests are not protected, or, you know, you come up against a massive IP infringement, and you spend all your money on that and suddenly realize what an impact that's had on you from a personal perspective. You know, is that something that people should really be thinking about?
There comes a point, and I would say it comes fairly early on in the life of a business, and maybe earlier than many people would think, when it's better to separate that business, give it its own identity. Typically that's done by setting up a company, and you can do that relatively quickly, relatively cheaply, and that ring fences the business's risk and the business's reward in one place, and gives it that track record that I was mentioning in the previous answer. So an investor will want to see a thing that they can invest in. Any bank lender will want to see a thing that they can invest in that has a credit history, an identity of its own, and owns all the things that it needs. So, for example, the intellectual property. For example, what contracts are in place? Do you have written agreements, or are you doing something very casual, very informal? That's going to worry a potential investor, that you haven't approached it professionally and credibly.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. Well, and I know that we're going to cover a lot more of these details in greater depth when we run our masterclass in September, which I'll let everybody know about. I see there have been quite a few questions in the chat here, most of them legal, and Patrick from your team is doing a great job at answering them here. So what we will do, I think, as well, is follow up in the in the follow-up email with some answers to any questions that haven't been identified. I know I see Sally here has a question, Linzi, and it would be for you around how to identify your core asset, which I know is something that is normally a 3-hour or 4-hour workshop.
I can give her a 10-second answer.
Yeah.
There are 5 layers of where your asset's going to be. It's either going to be in your brand, it's going to be in the product system, so something like IP or innovation or invention. It's going to be in the channel system, so community or data, something that's sat around there, or it's going to be in the sales system. Say you might be brilliant at a sales system, or you might be great at campaigning. Or the 5th layer is the infrastructure. Is there something that you do great in the infrastructure side in a system space? It's normally living in one of those 5 areas. That's the very quick 10-second response, not the 3-hour one that we do in the business school.
No, but I mean, I think it's a very valuable exercise to do that, because I know certainly when I did it, it came out to be something very different to what I thought it had been.
Very, very different. And when you understand that, you build your business very differently from what you would have built it before you understood what your asset was of your business.
Yeah, and then from there it kind of dictates all of your channels, right?
And the vision of what you're building to, and just to enhance what Sharon said, when you understand the destination and you're building it out from an asset place, the bigger value of the business, you then go back and look at, what am I doing today? What do I need to change? What investments do I need? What investment do I need to bring in? When do I need to bring it in? And what resources do I need to do? And that will be, you will then design your today business very differently from how you're designing the today business to move you into the tomorrow and future business, which will increase the valuation of your business.
Yeah,
that's a really good way to describe it. It's one of the huge challenges, and a question we often start by asking: what's the end game for your business? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to create something to then sell, or do you want to create something that provides you with an income over the next X number of years? Are you setting up a dynasty? Do you want this to be a family business that you'll pass on to Sharon Fryer and Sons or and Daughters Limited? What's your end game? And once you know the end, then you can work up to that from the beginning. So it's looking at it from the other side of the lens.
And always overlaying one key message. What do you want to be known for? And how do you want to leave people feeling? So when all else fails, remember who you are, why are you in business in the first place, and what's your purpose? Because if you do not drive it off your purpose and connect it with the asset, then you probably won't get out of bed in any way to be able to build the business.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. We've got one more question, Jo, and I think I'm wondering if you can answer this. Sarah's asking about content posted on Instagram and if there's any copyright around that. Have you come across that in what you've had to deal with Scamp and Dude?
I think, I mean, the only way I've dealt with it is people kind of understand that if you're going to share someone's image, you credit them. And Instagram is all about that. It is about sharing it, and you want your images to be shared as long as you're credited. Okay. I think it's a bit different. I think for a brand, as long as someone credits my image, I don't mind them reposting it. Like I said, I actually want them to. I think it's different if you're an influencer and you don't want your things being, or you've got a certain style that you're doing, and then someone replicates that. I think that's difficult because you build your whole platform on your certain style, and if someone just goes and replicates it, how do you protect yourself against that? Which I wouldn't be able to answer. I don't know if that's her question or whether
yeah, I think so. It's just basically she's just asking, like, yeah, if you post stuff on Instagram, are you protected in any way from other people copying it? And I suppose that's a really good answer around kind of, yes, you do want people to share it, but I've had issues where we've had people copy the style of our feed, and I don't think there is anything you can do about it, because it's just kind of, and I suppose creativity is very subjective, and the way that people view things, so it can be a bit of a gray area. But that's a really good question, Sarah. Thank you for asking that, and I think it's probably worth having a look at some of the fine print around Instagram usage to see if there is anything there.
I see Patrick has also chipped in to confirm that yes, there is copyright in original words and pictures and other materials, but exactly as Jo has said, you might want to make it clear if you don't want people to copy it, so that you are credited.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Patrick. Well, we have run just a couple of minutes over time, but I think it's time for us to end. If there are any other questions, we'll connect everybody via email afterwards. So feel free to ask those or to field them through me if you would like to. I'll happily pass those on and connect you with the right people to get answers to your questions. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I think as we're going into the summer period now, just as a sort of takeaway, I think one of the key elements around future-proofing is to really focus on your asset, your purpose, and go back to the drawing board and think about dotting your I's and crossing your T's. How are you protected in terms of your intellectual property, your trademarking, your will, your shareholder agreements, all of those things? I think, you know, yes, this has been a very challenging time, but it's also a time for us to think about resetting, relaying foundations in many ways so that we can springboard forward when the time comes. So, and that's certainly for me been a key message out of what's come, you know, what we've discussed today, but also from the various kind of women in our community who run businesses, that, and focusing on your community. If you aren't paying attention to your community, now is the time. You know, touch base with them, be human. So thank you so much, Joe, Lindsay, Sharon. I'm so very grateful. Thank you for joining us, everybody.